Oh, it's live? Oh, I guess it went live. Okay, hello. This is Chiak. We are back with hopefully the last set or reading session of Volume 2 of Death Stranding, based on production by Hideo Kojima and novelized by Hitori Nojima, translated by Carley Radford. Now, yes, there's this last episode, episode 12 here, but also epilogue. The epilogues are split into two parts. I don't know what that's about, but either way, first off, drink of water. And then let's get started. Episode 12, Sam Strand. Sam was lying on the sandy beach. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was the color red. It was a shade that he had seen somewhere before, a color that lay in the depths of his memory. The color of blood that he first saw in his mother's womb. Both the sky and the sea were red. Was this Amelia's beach? He couldn't believe this was the same beach she had brought him to so many times before. The planet floating in the sky made him feel even more uneasy. It looked a lot like Earth, but the land masses were in a different shape. At the very least, it wasn't the same Earth that Bridget had taught him about when he was a boy. The land looked like it was in the shape of a curled up fetus. Sam brushed the sand off himself and stood up. He looked this way and that, but there was no one else there with him. Maybe the jump had failed. Maybe now that the beaches were in so much chaos, he had jumped to a different beach from Amelia's. You're too late. What took you so long? The sound of Amelia's voice erased Sam's worry. When he looked in its direction, he saw Amelia standing there. Amelia? He called out as she stood there with her back to him, looking out over the ocean. You still don't know who I am, do you? She asked. The face of the woman looking over her shoulder at him was Amelia's, but the voice that belonged to it was Bridget's. I've been waiting for you right here. You were supposed to stop me. Stop all of this. Bridget? Sam gasped. The woman smiled. Yes, it's me, Sam, she replied. Her voice sounded like it was coming from far away. Did that mean this wasn't Amelia's beach? My daughter, Samantha America Strand, doesn't exist. At least, not in your world. Bridget's riddles only made Sam even more confused. I'm sorry, Sam. I've had to wear a mask for so long. Amelia and Bridget are both a part of me. Bridget admonished Sam with Amelia's face. Was she trying to confuse him even more? Do you understand, Sam? Amelia and Bridget. Amelia and Bridget. Those are just names. Sorry. Do you understand, Sam? Amelia and Bridget? Those are just names. What I am is an extinction entity, Bridget began to explain. This painting is a Da Vinci. Oh, wait. This painting is a Da Vinci. A man spoke. Bridget was looking at a painting of a woman holding a naked baby in her arms as it tried to wriggle its way out of them. It's called the Madonna of the Yarn Winder. The yarn winder is the thing the baby is holding. The baby is drawn to the yarn winder while its mother looks on worried. While her left arm is holding her baby, her right arm looks like it's about to pull the baby away, doesn't it? With that horizontal stick, the yarn winder looks a little like a cross. Sorry, I'm so confused who's speaking. With that horizontal stick, the yarn winder looks a little like a cross. As Bridget pointed out her observation, her father placed a large hand on her head. She may have pouted and resisted because she didn't want her father to mess up her hair, but in reality, she loved receiving his praise. She looked up at the painting hanging next to her father, who smelled of cigars, that had been painted almost 500 years ago. That's right. It's a cross. The baby is Jesus. The mother is the Virgin Mary. She was afraid that Jesus would be She was afraid that Jesus would be crucified on a cross in the future to sacrifice himself to save mankind. But how did the Virgin Mary know what was going to happen, Papa? Why didn't she stop it? Bridget asked. Because we're only human, her father replied. Bridget's father's face looked slightly cold. He seemed to smell of sweat. Bridget liked the smell of her father's cigars. They smelled like dried leaves, but she didn't like this smell. Holy sacrifice must be made so that humanity can keep on living. Bridget didn't understand what those words meant at the time. I was only 5 years old. It took many years afterwards for her to finally comprehend them. Bridget dreamt of the cross time and time again. For some reason, she always felt like she wasn't supposed to tell anyone about it, so she remained silent, taking her secret with her to the grave. So now, I can finally tell you. The shoreline stretched on for eternity. Bridget walked along it alone, looking out over the sea on her right side. Even if she carried on walking until her dying breath, she'd probably never reach the end. When Bridget realized that, it made her happy. It meant that this world would never end. The calm ocean surface reflected the light of the sun. It was so gentle and beautiful. Bridget was a smart girl. She knew that all life on Earth came from the sea. The sand on the beach was white and felt good as it poured through her fingers. It was fun to mold the sand and make sand castles and imaginary towns, too. She even built a breakwater so that her little town didn't get destroyed. Bridget knew she was dreaming, but she always looked forward to these dreams so much. But once she realized that the white sand was made from the corpses of coral and fragments of shell, she became afraid to dream. It became a beach of death. Bridget didn't want to have that dream ever again, but she couldn't pick and choose. Eventually, she came to dream of that beach every night. That eternal shoreline transformed into an eternal nightmare. It was some time afterward when she came to see the beach littered with crosses. She saw them thrust into the sand, floating in the sea, and disappearing and reappearing on the horizon. Sometimes she even saw them in the sky. Then, one day, she found a rotten, enormous cross discarded at the water's edge. It was so big it looked like it could have crucified a whale or a giant, but all that was nailed to it was a doll of a baby angel that had its wings plucked away. She felt so sorry for it that she rescued it. She found it cute, how its eyes opened and closed when its head was tilted. Even after she woke up, the baby still slept within them. After a while, other things began to appear on the beach. At first, it was the carcasses of small fish and birds. They didn't appear to be wounded, nor did they rot, but they were cold and lifeless, so Bridget assumed they were dead. Those things had already died long ago in Bridget's world. The animals that had gone extinct a millennia ago, the corpses of extinct species, the ammonites and trilobites, to mammoths and dinosaurs, increased and increased. The strangest part of it was how all the animals that washed ashore had umbilical cords. Bridget was frightened by her dreams, but she couldn't tell anyone. All she could do was hope and pray for the destruction of the beach in her dreams. And it was granted, although it wasn't quite destroyed in the way that Bridget hoped for. When she fell asleep and awoke on the beach, both the sky and the sea were stained blood red. For some reason, the old Earth that she had only ever seen in picture books floated above the horizon. The world was full of sadness. This time, she didn't feel scared like she usually did, but like she wanted to cry. From beyond the sea, the sources of her sadness approached. It was the things that had disappeared the moment that this world and this universe had been born. The second those things met this world, the sea boiled and the sky fell down. A wave higher than any skyscraper washed the shore, stranding all the extinct creatures. Corpses piled up on top of the white sand made out of more corpses. The young Bridget could only cling tightly to her doll and watch. Nothing lived on the beach. Those were the dreams of extinction I had. Even as I grew older, they wouldn't set me free. In my dreams, I watched the world end so many times. Countless past extinctions that decimated life on this planet, again and again and again. I even dreamt of the destruction to come. Human corpses used to wash up on my beach. They all seemed to look like me somehow. All of them had the same umbilical cord. That strong and intelligent girl learned to live with her nightmares of extinction. She could never escape from them, but she didn't let them overwhelm her either. They never drove her to suicide or madness. Her dreams of extinction made as much sense as living in this world did. That's how Bridget came to accept them in the end. Senseless people did things for senseless reasons. They started wars, they hurt each other, killed each other. It was the same as the beach. Bridget decided that she needed to understand why. Ever since she had tried to destroy her dream, the beach had turned into an even more frightening world. She needed to understand why that happened too. Bridget devoured knowledge. She learned about life and the universe. She learned about people, about the world. She learned about everything. She strived to understand this world in a human way. Her her entry into politics was an extension of that learning. It wasn't quite the right answer for me, but it wasn't a mistake either. Then I faced my first hurdle. It's stage 3, the doctor explained, showing Bridget an x-ray. Bridget felt numb. It felt like this was happening to someone else. The doctor cast his eyes downward and cleared his throat. I'm afraid it's going to require removal. It was just after Bridget turned 20 when the cancer was discovered in her uterus. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't shocked, but she had no choice in the matter. Bridget obediently accepted the surgery. As soon as she lay down on the bed and breathed in her anesthetic, she lost consciousness. Don't worry, it'll be over when you wake up. You won't even know. You won't even dream. You'll feel like it only took a few seconds, the doctor explained before the surgery. Like Rip Van Winkle, Bridget smiled back. What the doctor said was right, but it was also wrong. Bridget was on the beach. The surgery was over in a second. As she came around, Bridget felt a dull pain, and the faces of her doctor and parents swam into view. She was in the hospital room. It felt like she had only just been knocked out. But Bridget was still on the beach. She couldn't tell if she was dreaming or awake. She couldn't tell which side time was passing on. I was split across 2 worlds. My Ha in one and my Ka in the other. They existed simultaneously, but that existence was a contradiction. So Bridget came up with a story and gave the other Bridget on the beach a name. Amelia. Ame, I don't know how to pronounce this. Ame was French for soul. A soul that's a lie. As a human of this world, Bridget had to abide by its laws. Bridget had to give birth to Amelia. Then she saw it. A human corpse had washed up on the beach, one that looked just like her. If that was Amelia, then Bridget had to revive her somehow. She felt like if she didn't, then humanity would go extinct. Bridget had consciousness and a body, but no soul. Amelia had consciousness and a soul, but no body. But Amelia wasn't restricted to the beach. She could appear in this world too. Just as I could visit the beach in my dreams, Amelia dreamed and came to this world. Just like how BT comes here too. You can see dreams, but you can't touch them. That's why it's not incorrect to say that no one has ever met Amelia. Amelia on the beach was Bridget. That's why she looked just like her, even though I didn't have a ha. That was fine at first. In this world, Bridget's body followed this world's laws and began to age, while Amelia remained 20 years old on the beach. It was just after the first Death Stranding when Bridget realized she had to explain the gap somehow. America had collapsed, and Bridget sensed the dream of the beach she had been having since she was a child sliding into reality. The crosses, the corpses with their umbilical cords, the dolls, the things from across the sea she had seen so many times. In Amelia's birth, she had to weave them all together to create one strand. She had to use it all to unravel the truth behind her extinction dreams and the situation that the world found itself confronted with. The first lie that Bridget told was that she had a daughter named Amelia. She confessed to her young but skilled ex Special Forces aide, John Blake McLean, that Amelia had been born before the Death Stranding and suffered from locked in syndrome. That she didn't know why at first, but after she heard the theory that the beach linked life and death, it all made sense. Her daughter's soul had deviated toward the beach. After the Death Stranding, the beach connected to this world, and her daughter's soul, Amelia's soul, finally linked back to her body. His sympathetic disposition was a blessing. He could understand and attract others. His disposition was similar to Higgs, whom Amelia would go on to meet later. Despite the fact that he knew all too well how the world worked, he never exploited anything for his own ends. He was the kind of person who pushed forward without question, as long as it was for someone or something else's sake. Bridget told that Amelia had finally been born into this world, that her soul had converged with her body and she could move. Now she could go back and forth between this world and the beach. Maybe she could use such an ability to overcome this unprecedented disaster. John believed in Bridget and swore to dedicate himself to American Reconstructionism. They formed bridges and dedicated it to building a system that would restore America. That system was the chiral network. The beach was connected to the world of the dead, which meant that it was also connected to the past. Light and electromagnetic waves never disappear, they just continue to diffuse. They continue to the ends of the universe without disappearing. The electromagnetic waves given off by someone's brain, the memories of events recorded by the light, they never disappear. We humans perceive that world as the world of the dead, which meant that if humanity could piece those fragments back together, then maybe we could find a way to avoid another Big Five level extinction. It was a revelation to Bridget. In exchange, an umbilical cord grew from Bridget's abdomen. It wasn't an umbilical cord that connected mother to child, but an umbilical cord that connected her to Amelia on the beach. She tried to cut it again and again, but it always came back. It was just like the umbilical cord that she saw on all those extinct creatures on the beach. That's right. My umbilical cord was just like the one I saw on all those animals. I was the existence that you deemed the extinction entity. But why me? Why did humanity have to go extinct? That was another reason why I activated the chiral network. I wanted to know more about the past, know more about the path the world had taken through extinction and rebirth. I founded bridges for that reason too. But events were keeping pace with me. The voidettes began to happen more frequently. People were born with dooms. The BBs were born, but the longer I fought my war against the inevitable, the weaker I became. My Ha had cancer. The beach's punishment, maybe, for not playing along like a good little EE. And then, just like that, my Ha was gone. I couldn't finish what I started, but I asked you to do it for me. And you did. Amelia and Bridget were at the place where everything started. Once, there was an explosion. A big bang that gave birth to time and space. It was more like a big fluke. All that matter and antimatter should have cancelled itself out, leaving nothing. But somehow a tiny speck of matter survived. Just enough. Enough to make this world and everything in it. It's like the universe is trying to return us to the nothing we came from. A world that should have gone extinct is a world in precarious balance. Maybe the Big Five were its best attempts to finish us off. But somehow, life always managed to survive. Just enough. Enough to thumb its nose at the will of those cosmos. You know, I'm starting to think that extinction might be the key to overcoming total annihilation. It forces life to fight to survive, to endure, to exist. That's why the Big Five ultimately rekindle life instead of extinguishing it. From the ashes of the dead rise the living, stronger and wiser. Inheritors of the legacy of extinction, its inheritors of the legacy of existence itself. They defy the universe and refuse to surrender. Extinction is an opportunity. That was the truth Amelia discovered once the chiral network connected the entire country. It gave her hope and finally tied her existence to the existence of this world. But much like Bridget and Amelia were two sides of the same coin, this truth also hid another side. The crueler side. The gap between knowing and action was too large to cross. Even if mankind avoided total annihilation, they would still go extinct. Mankind was the species to be sacrificed on the altar of survival. Amelia had spent countless nights on the beach alone, despairing in solitude. Then she realized something. Her dreams of extinction were collected memories that resisted the truth of the universe, that it sought to return us to nothingness and brought her the revelation that could reweave Bridget into something new. What Bridget did was discover a third alternate side to extinction. It was me who made you a repatriate. It was me who tried to sacrifice you as a bridge baby, as the savior of this world, as a human offering. It was me who killed you. The phase of this world had begun to shift ever since Clifford Unger's wife had attempted suicide and been rushed to hospital. But for her, it was already over. Once she was pronounced brain dead, the doctor tried to resuscitate her, but it was impossible. There was an argument over whether life support should be continued. But in the end, she was taken down a different path. A direct order came in from a source close to the president. Cliff wasn't informed of the details. He was fobbed off with lies about how his wife closely resembled a case from the Manhattan Voidout 1 year earlier, so she'd need to be transferred to a government facility for the appropriate cure. The woman was 7 months pregnant. Once her fetus was extracted, he became the subject of the bridge baby experiment. Cliff believed that both mother and child were being cared for at first, but once he learned the truth, he tried to retake his son. He failed. Both Cliff and his baby died. According to the records, the one who killed them was the president's aide, John Blake McLean. It was me who pulled the trigger. I killed you and Cliff. I didn't mean to. How could I? How could I wish to kill our savior? I wanted to save Sam instead of saving the world from extinction. Wasn't that what I wished for? To save Sam so that we could watch the extinction together from this beach. Bridget wandered around the beach looking for Sam's soul. Just like in the real world, his abdomen had been torn in across by the piercing bullet. He had been left on the beach all alone. When she found him, she picked Sam up, restored his soul, and repatriated him back to the world of the living. Bridget had trampled over the very laws of this world. Bridget had killed a fetus that may have been extracted from its mother's womb, but was kept artificially alive in a pod and hadn't even been born yet. Then she brought it back to life. Sam's body wasn't one that could be returned to. Amelia had restored his soul, now his body had to adapt. It was an action that flew in the face of the entire flow of time. She had forcibly applied the laws of the world to this one. It made the world scream. But in doing so, I have set the fundamental balance between life and death. I just wanted to save you. But the moment you became part of that fate, you became repatriate, and doom started spreading my nightmares to others throughout the world. It was I that got you and everyone with dooms into this. Not long ago, not long after the Death Stranding occurred, the dead clung to our world. Until then, whiteouts affected all creatures. This world made everything disappear. But after that, it was only humans who necrotized, only humans who became BTs, and only humans who caused the voidouts. I had pulled the trigger on the sixth extinction. Excuse me, I really had to yawn there. And drink water. Okay. I may have been able to avoid the complete annihilation of the universe, but the extinction of humans was set in stone. Sam couldn't look Amelia in the face, but wherever he looked, he was reminded of her story. A strangely shaped earth hung in the red sky, now so big that it looked like it might fall down at any minute. The sea was calm, but silently reflected the blood-colored sky. The shoreline went on forever, just like Amelia's confession seemed to eternally go around in Sam's head. The last stranding had already begun. A seam has formed from my beach and the beaches of every soul in America. And soon, it will be inundated by a vast surge of antimatter starting here. Stay here with me and bear witness to the very end. Amelia sat down on the sand. Her golden hair swayed slightly. Sam could smell her scent. It was the same Amelia he had played with since he was a boy. He still didn't understand, but he still didn't understand what it was that connected her to extinction. You mean, just watch it burn? Sam asked. Together, with me, until the last flame winks out. Doesn't sound so bad, does it? Amelia asked sweetly. Sam had no words in response to her casual tone. The gates to the other side are already open. I can't stop you. I can't stop what's coming. But if you cut me and my beach loose, perhaps you can stop it from spreading. You might just prevent the last stranding. Mankind will live to survive another day. Excuse me. Then it doesn't have to end here? Sam asked. But it does, she replied. This beach is doomed no matter what. One look ought to tell you that, which is why we must sever our connection. But you can't stop the inevitable. The sixth extinction will happen, either today or tomorrow. Amelia handed Sam a gun. You can either end it with dignity, quick, clean, and in a flash, or you can struggle in vain, knowing full well what's waiting come the finish. Those are your choices. Sam couldn't tear his eyes away from the gun as it dully reflected the light. Until he arrived at the beach, he was certain that he would take out the extinction entity. He tried to make himself believe that the person calling itself Amelia was a sham, an evil being brought by calamity. So, to close the gate, all Sam had to do was take the gun and blow her away. But that wouldn't change the course toward extinction that humanity was already on. Knowing that now, what would be the point of taking that gun? Having just heard Amelia's confession, she wasn't the only extinction entity. Her patriots, those with dooms, and even bridge babies. If they had been born to resist extinction, then he also had to acknowledge that they were used to arrive at extinction. Sam gingerly reached forward and gripped the gun. I had to choose. He had to drink. He had to drink. What? He had to choose. Had to decide. Had to make a move one way or the other. If he didn't, nothing would ever change. He adjusted the weight of the gun in his hand. It felt heavier than any other cargo he had ever had to carry, and much more fragile. The wind blew, and the dreamcatcher hanging by his chest swayed in the breeze. It felt like the wind was blowing right through him, freeing him from all the weight. The gun dropped out of his hand and fell into the sand. These human hands that had forged so many tools over the ages to keep enemies away, now held nothing. Instead, Sam reached out with both arms like a newborn baby, grasping out for anything he could get his hands on. He embraced Amelia. He felt warmth, smell. He felt her warmth, smelled her scent, and felt her heartbeat through his chest. We're always connected. You know. You, not you. We're always connected, no matter what. You taught me that. Amelia hugged Sam right back. Oh my god, I'm reading everything wrong. Amelia hugged Sam back tightly. Sam responded. Their physical barriers dissolved and their cause connected. Here, it's a dream catcher. Sam was a young boy when Amelia had given him the dream catcher on the beach. Wear it when you sleep, and I'll keep the nightmares away. I'll always be with you. When you're all grown up, you'll need it to make us whole again. When the time comes, you'll have to stop me. You're the only one who can. Promise you remember, Sam. I'll be waiting for you on the beach." The fragments of his dream reconnected into one. The dreamcatcher turned bad dreams into good, but dreams are just dreams. Once you wake up, the same reality from before you closed your eyes is still waiting for you. But sometimes the power of dreams that you had in the past can show you a different side to the reality in the future. That was what Amelia had wanted to say back then, but Sam had been young and hadn't been able to appreciate the of value of what he had been given. Now he did. "You knew. You always knew," Sam said. "I did, and I didn't. I had so many dreams of the future. I didn't know which ones to trust, which is why I decided to share them with you and the others. But to connect the dots, to make sense of everything, you need perspective. You need time. Time has no meaning to me. I'm not a liar. I am a single point, which is why all I could do was just show you all the choices and let you decide." "Our nightmares are your dreams?" he asked. He found the common thread, the strand that links them together. "And you did that the only way possible, by living life one day at a time." Amelia lifted her face from where it had been buried in Sam's chest. The outline of the pair that had fussed into one returned to normal. Amelia thanked Sam and looked at the gun at his feet. "A gun won't help you here, but still has a role to play. It was the bonds between people that brought the world together, and that is what matters to you most." Well, I almost fell asleep there. Completely lost my place. Oh my goodness. Okay. "A gun won't help you here, but still has a role to play. It was the bonds between people that brought the world together. And if that is what matters, and if that was what matters to you most, then I will stay here on this beach. Once the last stranding starts, it can't be stopped. I can't go with you. All I can do is try to spare you the worst." "Why do you have to stay on the beach?" Sam asked. "I am the beach, and I must stay here and ensure that the extinction happens. Even if it takes tens or hundreds of thousands of years. That's what an EE does. If I stay here to pay the price, to be the sacrifice, then you should be able to have some more time. It's just that." As Amelia looked at Sam, she smiled a human smile. "I couldn't take it anymore. I got so tired of waiting, and I figured that no one would blame me if I just got it all over with. So that's why I decided. I don't remember when or where, but that's how I felt." Maybe that was the little girl talking who was yet to arrive at the truth. Maybe it was the old lady whose entire body was afflicted with cancer cells. Maybe it was even the woman who had a dream. Maybe it was even the woman who had the epiphany and rebuilding America. She had the dream and she couldn't talk to anyone else about it. But you and the others came, connected, and you may be living on borrowed time, but you still have hope. Before each of the big five, life rebelled. They fought back, evolved in order to survive. The extinction isn't just an ending, it's an opportunity. If I have to pay the price for that, then so be it. Even if we aren't together, we will always be confronted. We will always be connected. Amelia pulled Sam into another tight hug. Thank you, Sam. Those words were her last words. The strength in Amelia's arms suddenly slackened, and the sandy beach had been swallowed up by the sea. They were held afloat into a bottomless ocean, but only Sam was dragged back down. Amelia's voice echoed in her ears, and her warmth in his body, remained in his chest as he sunk to the bottom. Okay, that was chapter 12. Yes, it seems to be falling asleep. This is why I have tea. I guess I left it too long because the tea is very bitter. Sugar. Oh boy. Okay. All right, so now we are on Epilogue 1. It's kind of funny. It's so far of like, maybe because it's in the game, like you would have like a fight or you'll be fighting something. But in this case, I guess there was only like one point that shows a fight, which is between Higgs and Sam. But otherwise, it's just kind of like, he went to the beach expecting a fight, and yeah, no. It turns out, Amelia's Bridget, it's Amelia. They are one and the same, and there is a way to successfully do this. All right, Epilogue 1. For too long, we have lived as strangers to one another, divided by walls built to keep us safe. But now we have a new world. Sam had his back to the wall by the window and was listening to that voice. There was nothing outside of the window frame, but the backdrop of Capital Knot City was plugged into it. In the president's Oval Office, where Bridget had breathed her last breath and where everything had begun, Sam was listening to the inaugural speech of a new president. I'm really hoping it's a woman's voice, since that's what I did. He hadn't spoken about what had happened on the beach to anyone. He couldn't quite explain everything himself, so he didn't feel like filling in any of the others. Humans lived by interrupting the world based on their own experiences. That was part of the reason why the beach belonged to each individual. There was no need for every person to see exactly the same thing from the same perspective and place. People had been calling for the ceremony. A new country needs a new leader, they said. That's why this room had been decorated by hologram. And with the completion of the chiral network, we may at last move forward as a people united. Today, we come together to celebrate the birth of a new nation for a new world, the United Cities of America. That network now broadcasts the president's message across the entire country. To the citizens of this new nation, it was like their new president was speaking in front of their very faces. I once took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And so, as your president, I hereby swear once again to support and defend you, the people of the UCA, to share your destiny as a new me. There was a slight commotion. Sam looked up. Let there be a new America. An America where we can face one another, where we can speak our minds and open our hearts. The old ways die hard. But I believe, my fellow Americans, that we have the strength and the courage to rise above our past and embrace our future. Die Hardman stood there, maskless. Even though the new leader had removed his mask, that didn't mean that every veil and embellishment had disappeared. It was like there was an entirely new layer. Sam looked down at the worn out photo and sighed. It had returned with him from the beach. The picture showed Lucy, Sam, and her. It was different from what Sam. It was different from what was in Sam's memory. The Death Stranding is a part of that past, and an enduring shadow, a constant reminder of what could have been. That we stand here today is testament not to the greatness of any one individual, but to our capacity to come together, to the bonds between us, to our collective greatness. All things must come to an end, ourselves included. But as long as we savor each moment, find joy in the promise of tomorrow, embrace hope, and reject despair, we will endure. President Bridget Strand and oh wait, President Bridget Strand and her daughter, Samantha America Strand, sacrificed everything in their pursuit of hope. That we, the people, might be whole again. That they are not here today to see the fruits of their labors fills us all with a profound sadness. Bridget and Amelia's portraits were projected behind Die Hardman. Nothing was said about their true self, but they were instead allowed to be remembered how they depicted themselves. But we find comfort in the knowledge that their memories will live on in the chiral network and in our hearts. We will always remain connected. There are other heroes in the story. Sam put the photo away and began to walk. You whose achievements seemed destined to go unrecognized. America still needs that hero. Those without whom we would not be here. The name is unimportant. You know who I mean. And for those unsung heroes, I have a message. It was you who brought us together. You who made us whole again. And while you and I will eventually pass on, we will be survived by our legacies, our lives and our memories preserved for future generations. Maybe a day will come in due course when we can stop the Death Stranding with our own strength. For that, we must work as one. We must never stand alone again. Sam pushed open the oval office door and stepped out into the empty hallway. He could still faintly hear Die Hardman's speech. Sam wasn't upset or disappointed that Die Hardman didn't mention him in his speech. Now that he had thrown his old mask away, Die Hardman had to don the new one that came with being president. Sam also had to live with his secrets. She had embraced him. Then they separated, and Sam fell to his own beach. Sam was a repatriate. It was the first time he had visited his own beach. He couldn't tell it apart from the one that Amelia had taken him to. There was no red sky, no red sea, no BTs, just a quiet and calm beach. The only thing that remained the same was the shoreline that stretched on and on for eternity. The baby doll that Amelia had spoken of was cleansed by the waves. Its head was dark and there were marks all over its arms and legs and chest. It looked sad and worn out, like a kid had finally gotten tired of playing with it. Sam scooped it up when a slip of paper fell from inside it. Sam tensed up. It was the photo he thought he had lost. The photo of him, Lucy, and the smiling Bridget stood between them. It was the photo she had gone out of her way to print out and write a message on. Bridget had said that it would make it a one of a kind. Bridget had said that it would make it a one of a kind that could never be replaced. After the word strand came the word again. When Sam placed the photo in his chest pocket, the doll caught his eye. Now it was clean, with no marks. Now it looked just like a newborn baby. An accessory sparkled gold around its neck. It was Amelia's cupu. The cupu that Sam had given her all those years ago was now in the baby's hands. I had a knot when I make a friend. I had a knot when I make a friend, Child Sam had told her the day he gave it to her. Even though he shouldn't have been able to increase the number of knots on an empty beach, he did. He wandered around and around looking for an exit, eventually tiring and falling asleep. Every time he woke up, he added another knot. The Cupu was keeping track of the amount of time Sam had spent there. Once the Cupu was full of knots, they disappeared and it all started over again. Had Amelia counted her time here in the same way? When Sam thought about how damaging that must have been, his naivety as a child frustrated him. Once he had cycled through the Cupu knots yet again, he began to think that he was trapped in an infinitely looping hell, just like Cliff's battlefield and the beach Amelia spent her life as an extinction entity on. If Bridget's cancer had been divine punishment from the universe, then this was his. With each passing day, his belief in that grew stronger, until eventually it became certainty. There was only one way to get off the beach. A gun won't help you here, but it still has a role to play. The revolver was buried in the sand. Humanity would go on, but a load called loneliness weighed down on Sam. The weight of it brought Sam to his knees. Steadying his trembling hand, Sam put the gun to his temple. He could feel the cold of the metal and realized that he was drenched in sweat. He held his breath and squeezed. The sound of the waves seemed distant, and all he could hear was the sound of his own beating heart over the top of them. Then, clink, 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 clink. Instead of his beating heart, now all he heard was the vain sound of the gun hammer striking an empty chamber. What an idiot. Sam could hear Amelia smile sadly in his head. If he had been stuck there forever, what would he have done? Sam continued walking down the empty hallway. He could no longer hear Die Hardman's speech. Going somewhere, Sam? Dead Man asked, chasing after him. Tired of being the unsung hero? No, I'm done is all. She's gone, he replied. Come on, wait. There's something I need to tell you, Deadman exclaimed, grabbing Sam's arm. At first, Deadman seemed to have realized his mistake, but his look of horror soon turned to surprise. Huh. This doesn't bother you anymore. Deadman gradually pressed tighter and Sam grimaced. But they both seemed to know that it wasn't because he was having an adverse reaction anymore. Ever since Fragile had jumped him back, Sam had a feeling that he might have gotten a little better. In the midst of Deadman's grip, he began to feel like he must have completely recovered. Now, wouldn't you like to know how we brought you back from the beach? Deadman asked. Sam didn't know what to say. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't curious, but it wasn't going to help him anymore even if he did know. After he threw that useless gun back to the ground and began to wander the beach once more, he heard a voice. Familiar voices were calling out his name. He could hear Deadman, Hartman, Mama, Lochna, and even Lou's cries. They led him to the sea. See, you're connected, Amelia whispered. Then someone grabbed him by the legs and dragged him to the ocean floor. We were going to use the doll, but we didn't have one handy, which was when I remembered something else. Deadman fiddled with his cufflink and projected a hologram. That what I think it is? Sam asked. Yes, what could be more connected to Amelia's beach than President Strand's umbilical cord? Hartman thought that was why she left it. Hartman thought that was why she left it with me in the first place. Unfortunately, it didn't work, Sam guessed. Yeah, she already cut her beach loose. Deadman looked at his feet. It was just gone. We didn't know if that meant she dragged you into the great beyond with her or sent you to some other beach. We were really racking our brains. Hartman and Mama split up and started searching every beach you might feasibly have washed up on. We looked for a month with absolutely nothing to show for it. Sam thought about the disparity between the passage of time in this world and the passage of time on the beach. How long had he been there? It had felt like a lifetime to him. In the end, this is what led us to you. The man reached inside his jacket and pulled out the revolver. Just when we were about to give up, Die Hardman reminded us about the revolver, so we tried to follow it, and it led us to a far corner of your own beach. Sam once again found himself face to face with the gun that killed him and Cliff, the gun that started everything. Amelia had admitted that it was she who had killed them, so who was the gun connected to in this world? It must have been John Blake McLean, the president's aide. He had been the one to build a bridge to the beach by thinking of it. Bingo! There you were. Mama made visual contact first. She was able to see you from her vantage point on the other side. She informed Lucknow via their connection, and Hartman confirmed your location during his subsequent near-death experience. The plan was for Fragile to, in essence, slingshot Lou and me to your position so we could rescue you. So, it was Deadman who had grabbed Sam's leg and brought him back. No, it was all of them who saved him. All of them who had continued the search. Sam felt like his voice would waver if he tried to say anything, so he just nodded instead. But it's not so easy to send multiple individuals to another person's beach for an extended period of time, and that's where the umbilical cord came in. We wove these from President Strand's DNA. They serve as a single knot that binds us all. Deman puffed out his chest with pride and showed Sam the new symbol of bridges, a cupu. It was intertwined with the proof that Bridget had lived. The president must have known all of this would happen. Ironic, isn't it? The gun that set this whole mess in motion ends up being the key to saving you. Amelia, she said it had another purpose, Sam told Deadman. Not a weapon, but a lifeline. A stick that became a rope. I suppose that's one way of putting it, he mused. Sam was suddenly engulfed by something that felt like a soft, warm bed. Oh, Sam, you have no idea how long I've been waiting to give you a hug. Deadman's arms reached around Sam's back. He felt warm. It was like being wrapped up in a blanket when he was a kid. Got something else to tell you. Top secret. Deadman whispered into Sam's ear. It's about Cliff. His BB's mother name was Lisa Bridges. Cliff's common-law wife, and Deadman lowered his voice and looked down. Cliff was killed by a man identified in the records only as John, former U.S. Special Forces. Quite good at it, by all accounts. Later appointed as an aide to the president, who used him for most of her wet work. The records go on to state that he vanished after Cliff's death. A warrant was put out, but he was later found dead. Turns out some people die harder than others, though. Dear John donned a mask and reappeared with a new identity. Sam nodded silently to indicate to Deadman that he already knew. Melia had told him so. John had also had to sacrifice his past as another sacrifice on the altar of America. I don't trust him, Deadman blurted out, but I'll work with him if that's what it takes. We'll talk later. Deadman shook himself free and took off at a trot down the hallway. In his stead appeared the new maskless president. He was too close for Sam to pretend that he hadn't noticed him, and it would have been awkward to walk away. Hopefully, Die Hardman would just pass by, pretending not to see him. It was the president who spoke first, but he wasn't talking to Sam. It was like he was talking at himself. I don't expect you to forgive me. Die Hardman's voice was already trembling. But would you hear me out? I killed Captain Clifford Unger. He didn't mention killing Sam. That's how Sam knew he was telling the truth. I would tell you I did it for America, for love of country, but I didn't. I did it for her, because I loved her with all my heart. She was everything to me. Everything. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses. I just wanted you to know that not days gone by when I haven't thought about it. Time didn't help. Or the mask. Die Hardman couldn't have forgotten about the past. It lived on in that mask, weighed down on him. All he'd done was bury it. Sam could sympathize with that. He had done the same. That's why he couldn't stay there anymore. But as Sam tried to leave, Die Hardman stopped him. Please, let me finish. The captain saved my life. Sam didn't believe that confessions were ever for purification's sake. They were to offload a burden for someone else to deal with later. The one who took care of that burden was the savior, or humans to be sacrificed. If only that role was divided more equally among everyone, then there would be no need for a savior or a hero. A society that cries out for a savior is a society that's fundamentally broken. You know why they call me Die Hardman? Because he wouldn't let me die. He brought my sorry ass back home every time, and I loved him as much as I loved her. Die Hardman always needed someone to believe in, something to give up everything for. Sam was the same. Just as Die Hardman sought Cliff, Bridget, and America, Sam sought Lucy, Lou, and Amelia. When he stared me down, that ghost, I knew he was here to kill me, to make it right. Why shouldn't he? Why didn't he? He couldn't save his kid, his BB, and that's what brought him back. I guess when he saw I was trying to do my part for America, he remembered who he was and forgave me. Die Hardman cried loudly, falling to his knees. It was like he could no longer bear the weight of Cliff's forgiveness. God, I don't deserve it, goddammit. There is no atoning for what I've done, he cried. The man who had let his guard down was openly weeping, and was openly the man who had let his guard down and was openly weeping was no longer the president, but John again. Damn it, he yelled, pounding the floor with his fist. He kept hitting it and hitting it, not even aware that the pounding had broken his skin and that blood was splattering on the floor. There wasn't a shred of beauty or dignity in the man before him. But neither did he seem pitiable or small. Sam grabbed John's arm and helped him back to his feet. Maybe this is the next best thing. Maybe he brought me back from the beach for a reason. One last time. He wanted me to do this. To keep on being Die Hardman. No, he didn't. Sam cut in. John blinked. Nobody wants a president who acts like they're immortal. If you're not scared of death, how can you value life? Sam said, shoving the gun against the president's chest. And yeah, the old ways die hard. That's what's going to have to happen. If we're going to come together and build a better America. That gun won't help you here. The president slowly received the gun with both hands. Guns had been around since their ancestors first came to America. They were used for protection, killing, and upholding justice. But now, in the president's hand, a gun was becoming something else. Her words, not mine, Sam added. That gun had been a bridge to Sam. The president stowed the gun in the inside pocket of his jacket and wiped the tears from his face. Thank you, Sam. Sam walked away as those words echoed behind him. He was heading outside, from the underground hallway to those fields shining with light. Hey, Sam, been waiting for you. Deadman had been standing outside like a guard. The strong shutter that stood at the beginning of the slope leading outside was down. It was exactly where Sam had set out all that time ago to incinerate Bridget's body, where it all began. Deadman looked up from his feet. In his arms was the BB pod. Ooh, Sam didn't even have to check. That pod was already a part of him. The decommissioning order finally came through. Deadman's voice was cold. He sounded nothing like the man who had embraced him earlier. Poor thing was never truly alive. Not in this world, at least. I know you have a connection with Lou, but Lou doesn't belong here anymore. Can't risk a necrosis. The body can't stay here. I thought you might want to take care of it. You could try taking Lou out of the pod just to see what happens, but that would be in direct contravention of an executive order. Lou was floating in the amniotic fluid, eyes closed. Sam could barely tell whether Lou was sleeping or dead. And there are laws about that kind of thing now that we are a nation. I couldn't just bring myself to do it, but if the alternative is defying the president, I can't do that either. Not me. Dead Man was cradling the pod with both arms like anyone else would a baby. I'm sorry, Sam. All right. I'll go to the incinerator, Sam told him. That was the incinerator where Sam first connected to Lou. As he handed over the pod, Dead Man tried to act casual and wiped away the tears from his face. At the same time, he removed one of Sam's cufflinks. I just took your cufflinks offline, he explained. His tears were probably real, but while he pretended to wipe them away, he assessed Sam's cufflinks using his own. In that state, there'll be nothing to stop you from removing them. If you did, the UCA wouldn't know where you were or how to find you. You'd be invisible. When you use the incinerator, you'll be reconnected to the network automatically. You can't use it offline. I trust you remember what I said. Right. Absolutely. Sam took the pod. Thanks for everything. Before he ended his sentence, he turned around and hugged Dead Man. That man who had first burdened Sam with Lou behind his back was now openly entrusting him with the BB. The weight and significance of the action was completely different from last time. The light went up with a creak. Pale light streamed into the room, and the shadow of a person was cast over the floor of the entrance. How's the weather? Sam asked. Fragile turned around. Don't think you'll be needing an umbrella, she answered. She had made a complete recovery. It seemed to Sam like her smile had become softer than before. There were no longer any gloves covering her hands as she put the umbrella away. She had stopped hiding her scars. I decided to follow my father's dreams after all. Don't worry. I won't get mixed up with any terrorists this time. UCA's got my back. We're the first private delivery company to get official approval, Fragile explained. Sounds like you're moving up in the world. Congratulations, Sam told her. At her chest, above her brand new uniform, hung a kyupu, exactly the same as those worn by Dead Man and the others. Thanks. Wait, there's something I have to tell you. Her smile turned into a more serious look. I didn't shoot Higgs. Couldn't pull the trigger. So, I let him choose. Death or eternal solitude on the beach. As she bit her lip slightly and looked at her feet, it was difficult to tell from her face why she was telling Sam this. Did she regret not getting her revenge? Did she regret exacting her revenge on him the same way he did her? Fair enough. He never did like breaking things. That's right. I find and fix what's broken and reconnect it. I'm fragile. Her tone and expression lightened up a bit. But she looked Sam in the eye. Sam nodded and opened his mouth. But not that fragile, they said in unison. Wanna come work for me? Could use a man like you. Fragile asked the same question as she had asked back in the cave so long ago. Sam had to play along. The world's still broken, same as before. Come on, you put America back together, didn't you? She countered. Doesn't mean there's a place for me. I've got no ties to anyone or anything. I might as well be dead. I felt like that when we first met in the cave. I felt like that when we first met in the cave. And I still do. Fragile put her hand on Sam's shoulder. Don't act like you're the same person. You've learned how to touch, to feel. You've connected with people. With us. She was right. Ever since she jumped him back from the beach, he had begun to get better. Yet he still couldn't bring himself to be openly happy. Everything I touch, I lose, Sam told her. Fragile's hand left Sam's shoulder. Both her warmth and the weight of her hand disappeared. A ray of light pierced through the gap in the thin cloud cover. It was a sight that no one had seen for a while. Fragile squinted up at it. One day a woman like her might be able to go beyond the clouds. He secretly hoped that she would. Come on, Lou. One last delivery. Sam muttered to himself as he began to climb the slope. Okay, that was the end of Epilogue 1. I'm going to take a drink of this tea here. I'm continuing on with Epilogue 2. What time is it right now? Epilogue 2. The ground underfoot was frozen and hard, but the blades of grass that covered it were soft, like they were newly grown. Young Bridget had said that the sand on the beach she dreamed of when she was young was made up of corpses of coral and shells. But this ground was made up of the rotting corpses of living creatures, too. After the Big Bang, the small amount of matter that remained that didn't come into contact with antimatter came together to create this world. If it had come into contact, it would have disappeared. This world existed because something didn't reach out in return. Sam crossed the river that froze him to the bones, circumvented the cliff that looked like it was about to collapse, and struggled up the slope of a hill. Crowd bouts wriggled out from the shadow of a rock and floated idly in the air. If it hadn't been connected to the world by the beach, this strange creature would never have been discovered. It would never have been preyed upon by humans either. Right in front of him was something that Sam had never seen before. He stopped. It was a dull white, rod-shaped object, slender like a stick. It didn't look human. No matter how humans died, it was unlikely they would leave bones behind. Whether it was a void out or incineration, no trace of humans was ever left behind now. They weren't returned to this world, nor were they eaten by animals, other than the BTs. They were completely erased from the circle of life. They were completely erased from the circle of life on this planet. Eventually, all traces of them would wither away and they would disappear. Sam licked the bone. It tasted of dusty earth. Humanity didn't return bones to the cycle of life and death. Instead, they remodeled them into tools of aggression and destruction. Humanity had made its own system and became the rulers of this world, but that too was about to end. If I survive until that time comes, Will I see her again? Will she be there waiting for me on that beach? Will she be there waiting for me on the beach? It was impossible. Sam flung the bone away as hard as he could. Being so light, the bone didn't even follow a curve, it just dropped to the ground. It felt like someone was telling him that it was never going to reach beyond the clouds. It was of this land, of this earth. As Sam reached the top of the hill, the incinerator came into view. The inside of his nose began to hurt and his eyes began to water. This wasn't an allergic reaction. They were tears of mourning, tears that the living shed in tribute for the dead, for they could not lay the dead to their eternal rest where they belonged, but for their own protection, had to incinerate them to nothingness. Sam understood that now. He was still outside the facility. To enter, he would have to verify his identity. Should he go in? Should he go back? The inside of the pod was dark. Sam couldn't tell what kind of condition Lou was in. Not knowing whether he was doing the right thing or not, he pulled out the cord and connected to Lou. His mind exploded. This child is special. This child will be the bridge that connects us all. Sam heard a muffled voice and opened his eyes. Everything around him was blurry when someone's face swam into view. No, that's not right. Water flooded into his mouth as he tried to open it. It tasted like the sea. It ran down his throat and filled his lungs, but he wouldn't drown. He hadn't been born yet. He was still a creature of the sea. This is my fault. I should never have put you in that prison. Even from within that pod filled with amniotic fluid, he could distinguish Cliff's voice. And the second that all this is over, I'm going to take you wherever you want to go. Don't hesitate, sir. This is the only chance you'll get. This wasn't the first time Sam had seen the revolver that Cliff had just been handed. It was the gun that Amelia had given him on the beach, the gun he had tried to blow his brains out with after he lost all hope. Cliff checked the cylinder. This time it was fully loaded. John silently left the room. He only had 5 minutes. Cliff opened the cabinet and took out one of the stacked towels, wrapping it around the gun. Then he found a cushion and turned toward the bed. This bed was no ordinary bed. It was a man-made cocoon composed of light metals and reinforced plastic and electric circuitry, or man-made coffin. The sleeping woman within was half dead. I'm sorry, Lisa. Cliff pressed the cushion to Lisa's face and the gun into the cushion. Don't worry. I'll take care of him. I promise you. As he bent down to kiss her, he saw the black and blue bruises, the marks that had caused her brain death in the first place. Cliff didn't know what had driven her to do such a thing. He had shut those memories away. I'm sorry. How many times have I said those words to her now? And how many times am I doomed to repeat them in the future? Cliff wondered as he squeezed the trigger. He turned his face away and heard 2 muffled gunshots. The instruments connected to his wife hid her death and carried on spoofing vitals as if she was still alive. He had 5 minutes to get everything done. The face got closer and closer to Sam as Cliff cradled the whole pod in his arms. Bibi, can you hear me? Cliff asked. Sam's world shook, but didn't feel unpleasant. Can you hear me? It's Daddy. Cliff opened the door to the room and exited into the hallway without making a sound. Even though Cliff had walked these corridors plenty of times before, tonight they felt like a labyrinth. But this Orpheus wasn't trying to take back his lover. He was trying to reclaim his son. There should still have been a little time before the guards made their rounds. Cliff advanced straight toward the end of the hall, looking left and right as he went. As he took a left toward the entrance, alarm bells went off in his head. Several soldiers were headed his way from the right, but they hadn't spotted him yet. Cliff immediately went back the way he came and held his breath. 3 soldiers passed by silently. He couldn't go after them. He had to stick to the plan. Cliff headed to the right, the direction from which the soldiers had come from. He had 3 minutes left. He decided to sneak into a separate building from the adjoining hallway, but the door was locked and made of reinforced glass. He gave up and considered his options. Should he use his original escape route, or take a detour and head straight for the exit? Before he could decide, one of the options was taken off the table. He could hear voices at the end of the hall. They were getting closer. It sounded like a doctor and their staff. If he acted casual, maybe they would just walk right past him. It was still 1 minute until the alarm alerting them of Lisa's death went off anyway. His temples were covered with sweat. Cliff realized he was nervous. His hand that gripped his gun and his arm carrying the pod were both trembling slightly. This had never happened to him before. He had always managed to give any kind of danger the slip. He wasn't afraid of death. But once his son was conceived, death became much more of a worry. Even if he wasn't afraid of death himself, he still couldn't allow himself to die. That in itself had dulled Cliff's judgment and forced him to resign from active duty. It was no longer Cliff, but the impending alarm that decided his next course of action. The doctors were heading back in the direction they had come, but from the opposite side came the sound of several sets of footsteps. Cliff put his hand to the door in another attempt to open it, but from the other side of the glass came several guards with their guns at the ready. Freeze! The laser sight attached to the soldier's gun was dancing around Cliff's chest area. Cliff held up his own gun in his right hand and pressed it against the pod. The sound of the gun scraping along the side of the pod traveled through the amniotic fluid, but Sam wasn't scared. Drop it! The call for Cliff to put his gun down was echoed throughout the hallway, but Cliff made use of his trump card and kept the BB hostage. The soldiers backed off as he glared at them. Then the commotion from the other end of the hall grew louder. Stand down, soldiers shouted, but Cliff was already running off in the opposite direction. He heard a soldier fire on him. His left shoulder grew hot. Lukewarm blood dripped down his arm. The pod was also covered in it, and Sam's view of the world was stained red. It was the same red that he saw in the sky and in the sea on Amelia's beach. Sam had unconsciously yanked the cord out of the pod. A pain blew through his shoulder like he also had been shot. His body was covered in sweat. It was that vision again. In it, Sam had played the parts of both Cliff and the BB. But Cliff was already gone, and Lou had grown extremely weak. Why was he seeing that now? Something had made him see it. Maybe Lou was trying to reconnect with him. While one part of him hoped that was the case, another more logical part of him knew that he shouldn't get any more attached. It was the same logic that knew that Lou shouldn't be kept in the gap between life and death forever. That pushed Sam forward. The incinerator gave off the same sour scent of decay as always. This place was the end of the road. It was where all the traces that someone's body existed in this world had disappeared. To the living, this was the world's end. Sam remembered when he first met Lou, how Igor had entrusted Lou to him, and how he had repatriated from the scene. He remembered going against the command to incinerate Lou, and the first time he tried connecting to Lou. He and this kid had come a long way together. If it wasn't for Lou, Sam would never have made it to the other side of the continent and back. Even though Lou had exceeded the usual 1 year of service life, Sam had relied on Lou to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Of course, Sam was mad that the bridge babies were used as communication mediums and that they were sacrificed as the cornerstones of American Reconstructionism. Sam had done the same to this child. Had Sam really thought about what was best for Lou? He just blindly believed that Lou was a kid, still just a baby. The BB needed protection and guidance, but he was the one who had been protected. The incineration apparatus rose from the floor. The reason why it resembled an altar to Sam was because he wanted to remember the months and years he had spent with Lou as something special. For Lou, he wanted to transform the incinerator from a place of simple erasure to a place where he could preserve those memories for all eternity. This was to be a ceremony just for them, not for their American nation, not for the American nation, so he removed his cufflinks. In that state, there'd be nothing to stop you from removing them. If you did, the UCA wouldn't know where you were and how to find you. You'd be invisible. Sam decided to trust in the help that dead man had given them. He put his cufflinks on the altar. He was going to erase the Sam that belonged to Bridges. He put the pot on there too, to free Lou. Sam could hear thunder. The sky suddenly darkened and the smell of rain filled Sam's nostrils. If Sam dealt with Lou here, then at least Lou wouldn't be cursed to wander around with the rest of the dead. If the kid couldn't live in this world, then the least he could do was send Lou on to the next. Want to go home? The one who was asked and replied with a no was a young Sam. And this kid, the altar groaned as it began to sink back into the floor. I screwed it up. I ruined everything. Sam was looking down on Cliff. He was squatting down on one knee with his back to him. The blood pouring out of his left shoulder was staining the back of his jacket a dark red. Cliff stood up with a groan. I'm sorry, Lisa. Wondering Lisa's name and what sounded like delirium, Cliff turned back toward the door, leaving bloody footprints as he stepped forward. With a firm grip on the pod, he closed the door behind him and shot at the security panel twice to break it. Then he turned toward Sam. Cliff's face was flushed as though he was suffering from a high fever and his eyes were welling up. But he didn't see Sam. The only other person there was Lisa, under a blood-soaked cushion. Cliff passed straight through Sam and clung to the bed. Sam realized that the only part of him there was his ka. He was the only one aware. He was the only one aware he was stood there. No one else seemed to notice. Sam could hear a noise outside the door. In here! Someone banged on the door violently. The dull thuds echoed around the room. They pounded again and again and again. Eventually, the thuds turned into the sound of metal on metal. Together with the metallic grinding sound of the engine cutter, the door began to groan. Cliff seemed unaware as he slumped in front of the bed. Are you going to give up here? But Sam's thoughts didn't translate into words. They never reached Cliff. Baby, don't worry. It's okay. I'll always be with you. Cliff reassured the BB, trying as hard as he could to make sure that he was hearing his message. This room is off limits. No one goes in. Sam could hear a voice behind the door clearly trying to get the situation under control. He knew that voice. It belonged to John. The sound of the cutter stopped. But he's in there, sir. I saw him, the man protested. You saw wrong. Now check the other way. Go. John dismissed any resistance from the young soldier and sent him on his way. The commotion withdrew like the tide. Sam heard John breathe a sigh of relief on the other side of the door. Now's your chance. Run. But Sam's wish and John's actions didn't help Cliff. No. Open it up. He's inside. The command came from the President of the United States of America, Bridget Strand. John and the guards scattered. Special forces followed Bridget's command and broke down the door, surging into the room. Bullets flew through Sam as he opened his arms wide in a bid to cover Cliff. They simply ignored that he was even there and flew straight into their target. Cliff's body was thrown to the ground, where blood began to pool beneath him. Yet he still continued to talk to his BB. When I found out I was going to be a father, I was so scared. Scared of what it would mean. I had to be there for you and your mom, no matter what. I couldn't just go off and get myself killed anymore. Images flashed in the back of Sam's mind, a smiling Lisa rubbing her large belly, Cliff's back as he walked away, and Lisa tying a piece of rope around her neck with trembling hands. I couldn't leave you all alone. I couldn't, Cliff murmured. The soldiers stood still, guns still pointed in Cliff's direction. Get off of him, now! John commanded as he broke into the ring of soldiers that surrounded Cliff. In his hand was the gun that Cliff had dropped under the soldiers' fire. I had it all wrong. All wrong. Cliff was exerting so much effort to take each and every breath, yet he still talked to his BB. Being a father didn't make me scared. It made me brave. I'm sorry. It took me so long. Captain, look at you. Cliff noticed John and lifted his head. His bangs were dripping with blood and sticking to his forehead. He pushed them out of his face and cast his gaze downward once more. Don't make the same mistake. Be yourself. Be free, Cliff finished. As though his last ounce of strength had finally left his body, Cliff's beloved pod rolled to the floor. Before John even had time to reach out for it himself, a Special Forces member rushed over and scooped it into his arms. This was the end. All Sam could do was stand and watch, dumbfounded. John was crouching down in front of Cliff. It was like he was protecting Cliff, despite the fact that he no longer had any value to them now that the BB had been retrieved. That's when Bridget shouted. She was cradling the pod the soldier had passed her when her face turned pale, and she stared at Cliff. John gasped, and the soldiers became nervous. There was nothing in the pod. Captain, I need you to hand it over, John pleaded, his voice trembling. The naked BB was cradled in Cliff's arms. A puddle of amniotic fluid was dripping down from the pod and spreading across the floor. Let it go, please, John repeated, pointing his gun at Cliff's head. Cliff looked between John and the gun and grimaced. Or maybe it was a smile. Sam couldn't tell. Shoot him, John, Shoot him, John, Bridget commanded coldly. But Sam could sense some quivering in her voice, too. Sam tried to protect Cliff. He crouched in front of him, opened his arms wide, and covered the end of John's gun with his hand. Shoot him, Bridget commanded again. John's arms were shaking. Sam was glaring at John, but all that reflected back in John's eyes was the face of a blood-soaked Cliff. He couldn't do anything here. He couldn't control anything. He was so powerless. It must have been the same as how Amelia felt, only having a soul. He was overwhelmed with frustration at only being able to stand there and watch. I gave you an order, shoot him! John's trembling finger squeezed the trigger. They told me your name was Sam Porter. Sam heard Cliff's voice behind him. He turned and Cliff nodded. He saw Sam. But you're Sam Bridges. All Sam could hear was Cliff's voice. Everything had stopped. John's finger was still on the trigger. Neither Bridget nor the Special Forces operatives moved. The only ones moving in the midst of this frozen scene were Cliff and Sam. My son. My bridge to the future. Cliff cradled the baby and stood up. He staggered a little, but he seemed to be full of energy now. He was looking Sam straight in the eye. Without you, I was just like any other Cliff. Dead end. No way forward, but nothing but an obstacle, looking on at the world that people like you were trying to build. Dividing people was the only thing I was ever good at. Sam was still crouching by Cliff when Cliff reached out to him. But not you, Sam. You bring people together. You're their bridge to the future. And mine. Come on, Sam, stand up. Cliff's hands were covered in scars and wrinkles. They were the hands of someone who had been through war. They were both strong, but delicate. Even though they were stained with blood, they weren't dirty. Cliff passed the baby he was cradling in his arms to Sam. It was so small that it looked like it would fit inside the palm of his hand. It was soft and warm. Sam could feel its heart beating. Its little heart was beating away strongly. It synchronized with Sam's own heartbeat. Is this me? Sam asked. Cliff nodded and hugged Sam. Sam could smell cigarettes and blood. It was the smell of a father. It was only slight, but Cliff squeezed his arms around Sam a little more tightly. The pause time began to play again. Sam heard 2 gunshots, and Cliff's body twisted twice. His grip loosened. When Sam looked, the baby had disappeared. All that was left in his hands was blood splatter. Cliff was staring into the distance. Sam was no longer reflected in his eyes. So much blood was pouring out of the right side of his chest. The baby he had been holding was covered in it too. The heartbeat that had just synced with Sam's was no more. Oh God, not the baby too. How could John play innocent like that? Sam looked up. John was holding the gun, but Bridget's overlaid hand had pressed his finger on the trigger. Cliff's body slumped to the ground like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The baby's body rolled to the ground alongside him. Bridget ran over to the baby, screaming something, and scooped it up into her arms. As Sam stared at his own dead body, all he could do was stand there. I'm very close. Sam watched the lid to the incinerator casket close, and the whole thing sink into the floor. It was burning his cufflinks. His connection with America was burning away. Now that his right wrist felt lighter, he used it to pick up Lou. A puddle of amniotic fluid was spreading out across the floor. The cross-shaped scar on his abdomen burned. That same mark that had formed when Sam Bridges was brought back to life before he was even born, that had been left behind when Amelia had restored Sam's car on the beach, was throbbing violently. Sam hadn't been able to burn Lou after all. Sam knew that his talk of returning this child to the land of the dead and doing what was best for the child's well-being had all been bullshit. Just a lie he had told himself. He knew that from the start. He just wanted to feel this child's skin, just like Cliff had held Sam as a baby, how Amelia had held him on the beach. Sam wanted to hold Lou. Maybe it was a one-sided cruel love. Sam couldn't promise Lou what that love would bring. But Sam knew that he couldn't burn Lou without a hug. Now his wish had come true. No, he made it come true. But Lou didn't respond. Lou felt warm, but the breaths and heartbeat that Sam felt were shallow and weak. Lou. His persistent calls for Lou were just like those Cliff had made. Lou. Sam rubbed Lou's back and tried to massage arms and legs that were so thin they looked like they could snap. Sam had no idea if he was doing it right, but Sam kept calling Lou's name, hugging Lou close and rubbing the small body to stop the ka from separating from Lou's ha. Want to go home? Where had Amelia meant when Where had Amelia meant when she asked me if I wanted to go home? Where had Cliff tried to take me when I was a baby? Where am I going to take you, Lou? Where do I want to show you? It's too early to go to the world of the dead. You haven't even been born yet. Let's not head to the realm of the past where everything is settled and finished, but toward the future with infinite possibilities. Right now, the only choice that lies in that future is for you to come into this world. So wake up, Lou. I'll anchor you here. A vague umbilical cord of particles formed at Lou's abdomen. It was a sign of necrosis. So, this kid would never be born into this world after all. If I'm not with you, Lou, I can't begin anything either. Even if you don't want to live with me, I want to live with you. Even as Sam's tears dripped onto Lou's face, Lou was still trying to return to the world of the dead. No, Lou. Sam closed his eyes so that he didn't have to look at Lou's umbilical cord. As he stood there holding Lou, unable to do anything but cry, he knew that he was the stupidest man in the world. The dream catcher that hung by his chest caught on something. Sam looked up. Lou's eyes were open. In Lou's right hand was Amelia's kyupu. Lou had returned. Before Sam had the opportunity to shed any more tears, Lou began to cry out loudly. Lou screamed out to the world, "I'm here." Lou was crying, trembling all over, to shake off the border between life and death and tear away the shackles that bound the baby between them. Welcome back, Lou. Welcome back, Louie. As Lou screamed her lungs out, Sam kissed her on the cheek. He felt her tears on his lips. They were the tears of a living, breathing child. Sam left the incinerator to find that the rain had cleared. A rainbow drew a beautiful arc over the ridge. It wasn't the upside-down rainbow Sam usually saw. The blowing winds brought with them a scent that Sam had never smelled before. Sam looked back over his shoulder toward the incinerator, began to walk back the way he had come. But what lay before him now was a new place that he had never been to. Let's go home. Sam heard a familiar voice that he knew from long ago, somewhere before. And that is the end of the Death Stranding, the novelization of Death Stranding. Which I've never played the game, but I have seen playthroughs. I think I've already said this before. But yeah, I mean, from what it's been some time. From what I remember, like there's obviously some extra stories about the side characters that isn't in the game. It adds a bit more context. It's also a nice way to kind of like to contextualize what exactly is happening and all the mythos that is happening in this game, because it is hefty, I have to say. Reading this, I'm like, oh my god, there is literal chapters and pages where someone is just doing the exposition, and it's, I guess the concept is like crazy enough that it's going to keep your interest. But yeah, so I think, guys, after this I'm just going to donate these books to the library. But that is it for finally. It took me so long, too many breaks, honestly, but life. And then I don't know, if I'm going to read something, usually I've been sticking with like game related stuff, but I have a copy of The Wizard of Oz and I kind of want to read it. Reread it. Because I know there's some differences from like the movie version, if I'm remembering correctly from what I read. Either way, That is it for Death Stranding Volume 2 and the whole entire series together. Though the sequel to the game is at some point going to be released because there was a trailer for it. So either way, thank you for liking if you liked. Thank you for commenting if you commented. Thank you for subscribing if you subscribed. Thank you for favoriting if you favorited. Thank you for simply clicking on this video. Did I say the favoriting thing again? Yeah, I did. Either way, until next time, guys, see ya! If I can click the end of the stream, there we go.